Welcome to section 4, Advanced React Patterns. So in this section, we're going to learn how to use components as a unit of styling, and we're going to learn how to spread props to wrap components. Both of these are slightly more complex topics, so I'm not going to go into what those phrases mean in too much detail, but I'll explain as we go. Using components as a unit of styling. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use components as a unit of styling. So you can store styles with your components and reuse them in a modular way. So the difference I often see between experienced and less experienced developers that work with React is the realization that components are quite cheap. You can create as many React components as you want. And actually what you really should do is probably create quite a lot of them. And one tactic that I've seen the community start to embrace a lot is once you realize that you've got these components, you can have components which use other components internally, and then you can tweak them ever so slightly. People have kind of started to think, well, actually using these mechanisms where I can have a component which actually has another component inside it, you can actually have the defining thing that differentiates components being the styling. So you can include the styling with a component, and that's a perfectly fine thing to do. I think when people started building React, they would keep the styles quite separate from all the code, but as time's gone on, actually, having a large button component, which for your code base is the sort of standard large button, and anywhere you want a large button, you just grab that component. That actually seems to be quite a good idea, and people are relying less and less on cascading style sheets and having global styles or global classes and stuff that, saying, oh, all my buttons are going to look like this for my application. You can define that in CSS, but instead what you can do is define it in a different way, which is to say I'm going to have a component which is a button, and anywhere I want a button in my app, I'm going to go and grab that button component, and that button component looks the way that a button should in my app. So I'll show you two different approaches to do this. I'll show you the way that people used to do it, or still doing it in many cases, and the way which they might do it hopefully in future. So the first way I'm going to show you is the old way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in app.css, I'm going to add a global style for a button. So all buttons in the app are going to be styled like this. This is some styling for a button I grabbed off the internet, which uses pale violet red, which is a beautiful color. I'm sure you'll appreciate. So now that I've applied that, you can see the add button now looks, I was going to say wonderful, but it looks pretty terrible, really. Maybe we can improve on that slightly. Hang on. Yeah, okay. We can very quickly improve on that. So now we've applied this global style button. So all buttons in our app will now look like this, and we can have a look at what that looks like. So we've got this glorious violet red in the app now, and if you add any button, then it will look like this. And that's great. You can do that, and that's fine, and it's kind of global, so anywhere you add a button, that will just happen. So that's kind of the old way of doing it. I'm going to show you another way. So I'm going to comment this out, which should send our button back to being rather ugly. Yep. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a button component. And this may seem like overkill at first, but actually I've started doing it a lot more, and I think it's great. So in my button component, I am going to make sure that I'm going to set the style. Need to go back and get that style again. Have all of these things. I'll define it up here. Const button style equals, and then we can quickly try and fix this up for you. I've passed children in between here. Children is a special prop that denotes what goes in between the start tag, the end tag. So let's try using that instead in our app. So in add posts, rather than saying button, I'm going to say capital button. And then we need to import that from here. There was something I thought wouldn't work. Oh yes, so we must import React because we're doing JSX and React stuff in here. So this is just a button with a style. That's it. I think I imported it incorrectly. It's a capital button. You need to make these into strings. Almost everything is broken. Make sure you have props in the parameters there. Hurrah! So we've got it back to working again. You can see this button now has all these styles applied manually, and it looks just the same. Now, if we were to use that same button component somewhere else, we could totally do that. So The advantages of this, I suppose, are that you've got slightly tighter control because no one else can use these styles because they're not exported. So whereas with, before we were affecting every button in the app, now you have to explicitly say, I want to use our default button. That can actually be really powerful. To understand how, you probably need to understand spread props, which we've not really covered yet. There are some really good libraries, that help you do it in this sort of way. And the one I would really recommend taking a look at, that I've started using in a lot of projects, is called Styled Components. I'll just quickly show you the docs. So what Styled Components is really a way of, it lets you use CSS instead of using styles to do this, but it really, heavily embraces this idea that actually, like here you can see they're creating an input and they're giving a standard bunch of styles, and then this is a React component that you can reuse in different places. A really, really powerful concept. You can create lots of little components everywhere and give them nice names, and I really like it. The advantages of this technique in general, though, with just having the style here, is that we've got this button. If you then say, we're going to use this button everywhere in the app, and then you want to tweak your button, all you need to do is come in here and change some of these styles, and the button will change everywhere. You can do the same thing with CSS, but it's very global. That's not brilliant. And actually, I've found over time that knowing like when I want to change my button, I just go here and change it, is actually a lot better than having the style being global. Because then you get into like weird clashes where like you've styled your button in some way, but then you want a bigger button, but all buttons are going to inherit that CSS. So that's where like the cascading comes in, and yeah, sure, it will work. But I'm going to show you in the next video how you can implement, for example, a large button using this technique, and you can reuse a lot of your styles by having a hierarchy of components, and it's a very, very powerful technique. In this video, we took a look at CSS modules, which can protect us from global CSS classes.